Hello, have you heard a saying that says life is what you make it? Yeah, sometimes you do. You have destiny in your hands, and it's up to you to decide. Ever since I was a young kid, I decided that those things that I wanted to do, I will do myself. I don't need to ask others. Maybe it's because I was the firstborn uh, in my mother's womb. The one that followed me was a sister, 6 years after I was born. So I was a standalone somebody. Where I grew up to age about 14, that is in the rural areas, I had to look after myself. Those who had brothers uh, could tell their brothers to stand for them if they had a clap or two from some older boys, bullies. But I had to stand up against far much older boys than me. Because of that, I charted my own path. In school, I ended up in what today is grade 6 or standard 5. That was in the early 70s when standards were being changed from, into grades. I ended up there. My parents were not educated. My mother was uneducated. My stepfather was uneducated. My biological father left me when I was about 2 years old. I hardly knew him. Um, but I was very intelligent. I remember I did sub A, B, and because of my intelligence, I was moved from sub B into standard 2 instead of doing standard 1. And from there, I excelled, right? But as it is always the case with intelligent kids, I had to stop somewhere because I didn't have the money to go forward. I remember once on a good time, I wore my mother's blouse as a school shirt. I remember the color was blue. We used it to wear blue shirts because I didn't have a shirt, so my mother gave me a blouse. you, you can imagine how big that blouse for a 10-year-old kid or so. But well, I dressed myself into that and went to school. Uh, Later on, my mother went to stay with my stepfather at his workplace, at a place called Deka, that is near Wange town in Zimbabwe. My stepfather worked for the railways. So when my mother went there, I was left with an aunt. Um, you go to school in the morning, no breakfast, no shoes, in the burning Kalahari sands. It will be cold in the morning when you go, or warm, should I say. But when you knock off at around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, the sun will be burning hot, and you have to run a distance of about 7 kilometers, 7 to 8 kilometers way back home. When you went home, you'll find the aunt is not there. She has gone beer drinking. You pick yourself a tin and go to the bowl to fetch water. After fetching water, come back. There's no food. You last ate your meal yesterday. That was supper and finished. You come back, there's nothing. If you are lucky, you find a drink brewed from millet called maheu in our language. It's a non-intoxicating drink. But in this case, there is zero, nothing. Come back, go to the granary, measure yourself a dish of millet, pound the millet for an hour or so, pound it to make meal. Then cook yourself and the hare lunch, because when she comes back, she will demand to know what the food for the day is and what you did about it. That is the life not only I went through, but many other boys of my age or children of my age went through. During my time in the 70s, you went to school with no shoes. If you were lucky, your parents or relatives will buy you what they called in those days tenderfoot, some black canvas shoes with a star on the ankles. I remember vividly. But I wasn't so lucky. So were many other kids. We just ran to school in the Kalahari Sands in the morning. Come June, when it was very cold, or come August, when it was very hot, it was the same. For boys, I wore a pair of khaki shorts and a blue top as a uniform. I went to a school called St. Michael's, commonly known as the Sacred Heart Mission. Those who are conversant with the Wange district know what exactly it is. Ironically, I came to teach at the school. That is a subject of another day. But what you need to know is that I used to run to school wearing a pair of shorts, a top, in this case my mother's blouse, no underwear at all. Underwear were a new thing, a foreign thing which we never knew. Shoes were something foreign. Only the lucky ones would have them. But as far as I remember, at the school where I went, I never saw anyone who was wearing any shoes at all. We all ran to school with our feet in the burning Kalahari Sands. As I said, I dropped from school in what was then Standard 5. It was Standard 5, which is roughly grade 6. Because grade 6 is between Standard 4 and Standard 5. That's where I dropped. And left school. At the Sacred Heart Mission, point of correction, I dropped in Standard 4. Then stayed for a year without going to school, until an uncle came from somewhere at a place called Dorset. He also was working in the railways. When he came the following year, he found me in the rural areas doing nothing. And he asked me if I wanted school. And I said yes. So he went with me to Dorset, near a town called Zishalani. There I did my standard 5. That is where now the transition to grades was happening, which was grade 6. And after a year of learning there, I dropped again. This time, as a small kid, I was thinking of my mother and my parents. So I left and went to a place called Huntersford, near Gweru. That is where my parents were staying. This is the life I had as a kid. It's a long story. We shall continue. As I said, life is what you make of yourself. Because despite my having stopped learning in grade 6, standard 5, transitioning into grade 6, years later, it was years later, during the War of Liberation, when I started corresponding with Central African Correspondence Schools at the time. I did grade 7 for 6 months, just to show how intelligent I was, and went to write examination at a school called United Schools in Hwange. I remember we sat for examinations invigilated by 2 teachers, a headmaster and his colleague. I wrote with a friend, a church member I used to go with, called Kepson Dobola. He was also corresponding grade 7. We were invigilated by 2 teachers. We sat for examinations, the 2 of us. Guess what happened? I passed grade 7, having done it for 6 months. I don't know how many months Kepson did this grade 7, but he passed. After passing grade 7, I enrolled for RJC or ZJC then, which was called Rhodesia Junior Certificate, Form 1, Form 2 combined. I did this for a year and wrote the examinations at Sir Humphrey Gibbs in Hwange, number 2 Collier, in a very dusty place. I wonder how school children were going at that school, because for you to sit and write an examination, you were advised to carry newspapers or a cloth to go and clean first, clean the desks and where you were going to sit before sitting and writing examinations. I wrote the examinations and passed ZJC. After passing ZJC, I didn't stop there. I enrolled for ordinary level with London University examining board. not the university as such, but the London Examining Board. Meanwhile, I enrolled as a temporary teacher with my ZJC because that was 1980 now. We will talk about the war and what happened during the war. But for now, I'm talking about the destination of my life in my hands through education. I enrolled for uh, as a teacher, temporary teacher. That was in 1981 to 82. Meanwhile, I was corresponding with London University, O level, right? Because I didn't have maths at JC, I had to leave teaching to go and concentrate on my ordinary level. That was after a year. So between 1981, 82, I was busy with O level, and I wrote the O level in November 1982. Come January 1983, I re-enrolled again as a temporary teacher at St. Michael's, the school that I went to. And I was a grade 4 teacher in 1983. I passed the London O-level examinations through correspondence. This time I was doing with the Rapid Results College. After passing, I would say I was now ripe for better things. Right? Vacancies availed themselves at the then ESC, Electricity Supply Commission, in Wangi or Wange Town, as it was now called. Right, I applied with many other young teachers at St. Michael's Media School, otherwise known as Sacred Heart Mission. We applied. We were about 33 teachers. About 15 or so were young girls or young women and young men, myself included, who were holding good certificates. We applied, some applied for nursing, some applied, I applied for a plant operator's job at Wange Power Station. But I liked teaching more than anything. So as I was debating whether to continue with teaching or go to Wange, or should I say, I went for the interviews in Wange and passed the interview. These interviews were held by gentlemen from CEGB, Central Electrical Generating Board from the UK, white men. They were shaking when they saw my London University O-level certificate. We were a small club, people who did correspondence, who wrote O-levels using London, and we were a feared group. So as I was debating, having passed the interview, whether to continue teaching as I liked teaching, one day the headmaster, a certain Mr. Philip Mube, who is now late, may his soul rest in peace, came to the boardroom one day and announced that those who wanted to leave the school the following year, that was 1983 in October, those who wanted to leave the school the following year should put their resignation then. The reason for this, as we later discovered, is that the school being a Roman Catholic school, there were a few ladies who had boyfriends, who were bringing boyfriends at the school, and the Catholics didn't like this. A certain father so and so didn't like it. So they discussed with the school head. Instead of warning those girls, telling them that they should leave the school, they went on a blanket pronunciation that those who wanted to leave the school should put their resignation. Ah, come on. I stood up and asked the head, what if no one wants to resign from the school? And I sat down. The head unequivocally said, do you know what happened at Neluswi Primary School? At Neluswi Primary School in Jambes in the Wange district, Zintec, the organization that runs teachers or rent teachers programs in Zimbabwe in the 80s, I don't know if it's still there, would simply deploy teachers to a certain school without any warning, no notice, and temporary teachers will be told, please, can you leave? New teachers are here. So it will be up to the temporary teacher to vacate premises and go look for a place. So Mr. Mue, the headmaster, says, you know what happened at Nelushi in Jambes Primary School? That will happen here. And he sat down and I stood up again. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, you heard what the head said. It's good for us all and everyone to himself or herself. That was on Friday. On a Sunday, on Saturday, I woke up early in the morning. I went to go and see Father Moreno, who was the manager of the school, overall in charge. The man liked me, he mentored me, I should be honest. I went to see him. I said, Father Moreno, well, priests are called Father, although he wasn't my father. Father Moreno, you sent your head yesterday, and this is what he said. Therefore, I have decided that I'm leaving. I'm going to Wange. I got myself a job in the power station. I actually decided to go to this job reluctantly. A friend of mine, Mr. Paul or Paul Shaba, is the one who said, hey, why are you hesitating? In teaching, you get nothing. Move. So in the morning, not to say there's nothing in teaching, but he was comparing with what he himself was getting and where he had been after teaching for several years, and I was a young man. So he was pushing me to go to an opportunity. So I said, Father Moreno, I'm leaving. He was distraught, heartbroken. No, please. This is still a private school. The government doesn't decide who to employ. We decide here. I said, Father, it is still coming. The government will do it. Then he said to me, okay, if you are leaving, are you not going to give notice? I was blunt, and I don't blame myself. I think I was right. Because the way the headmaster spoke to us is exactly the way I spoke to him. I said, Father, in temporal teaching, there is no notice. You just get fired and you start looking for new employment. That was that, having taught at the school where I used to run to barefooted with no underwear, no lunch, no breakfast. I kissed the school goodbye. Then I went to Wange, where I got employed as a plant operator, starting as an auxiliary plant attendant. Now, here comes the good story of my journey. I never stopped learning. After having passed the ordinary level with London University, I decided to enroll for A level with Cambridge. Meanwhile, I started my job as an auxiliary plant attendant. I never sat on my laurels. I never sat down. Immediately, I went under the wings of a certain Barry Callahan, who was the shift charge engineer. The first day I saw him, next day I went to his office with my notebook. Before the knocking of time, and showed him what I was going to be studying and asked for his permission. He said, "That's fine. As long as you are not going to touch anything, you can go in the plant and learn." I started my learning journey. There were Indian operators, the segregation of the time, because the power station was meant to be operated by white people, and the Indians being the auxiliary plant attendants. Africans were supposed to be just sweepers. But fortunate for us, when we came from the war, blacks were now a step up. They were going to be operators, although some of those who didn't have much schooling were going to be sweepers, that's okay, and the other menial jobs or clerical jobs. But the sky was now the limit, because blacks were going to be operators as well as engineers. When I started my journey as an auxiliary plant attendant, they were also trainee engineers, right? To cut a long story a little bit shorter, I rose within a period of 2 years from an auxiliary plant attendant to a unit operator. Those who know the power generation system, a unit operator is an operator who can operate both a turbine and a boiler. But when we started, there was a turbine operator, then a boiler operator, but within a year, the then general manager, who is now the chief executive officer of ZESA, Dr. Gata, went to France and other countries in Europe, and when he came back, he introduced the unit system. So in 2 years' time, I was already a unit operator. Right? After 2 years, the power station needed, actually, before I got there, myself, the late David Miaruka, and the late George Nyemba were the first unit operators in Zimbabwe. In the other small power stations, that is in Bulawayo and Minyati and Harare, they had a turbine operator and a boiler operator. But in Wange, we were the first unit operator. That brings my name. My name is Richard Donald Musaka. After 2 years and a half or so, the power station now needed foremen. Before I go there, The CGB guys, those who trained us, held a party in Baobab in Wange, in the Chibondo suburb, for me, George, and David to celebrate us becoming the first unit operators in Zimbabwe. Right? After 2.5 years to 3, power station needed foremen. Again, this time there were about 15 unit operators. When we went for interviews, the first interview, which I didn't go, David Miaruka and George Nyemba were selected as the unit operators. I was secluded tribally. I have got to mention this because it's public information. Together with Dominic Dlamini and maybe 2 and 3 others, we were segregated. So it was only George Nyemba and George Nyemba was no longer an operator. He was now working in the main control room. It was the late David Miaruka and the late Davidson Makwere who were selected as operators. My charge engineer at the time was Norman Mills, and he had gone on leave in the UK. When he came back and found that I wasn't among the selected people, he asked why I didn't go to the interview. I told him that I was told I didn't qualify. So a certain black trainee shift charge engineer, Masimba Mele, asked me to go and see Deb Sawyer, who was then the production manager. Because at that time, the power station system had not yet introduced an operating manager. The production manager is what now is called an operating manager. Mele asked me to go and see Deb Sawyer and asked why I wasn't called to the interview. I said, what is the point? There will always be chances. He said, no, go and find out. There's something he will tell you. Then I went to Deb Sawyer's office, knocked at his door. Immediately I entered into his office. He said, Richard, why didn't you come to the interview? He was holding a black notebook, counter book. He said, you were supposed to be in the interview at 11 o'clock. Here's the time here. My God. So I said, why didn't I come? I received a letter. Then I showed him the letter, which said, we regret that your application was not successful. Hell broke loose in the power station. I was a popular guy anyway. So they inquired and found that the personnel manager, who was a certain Mr. Mukuruba at that time, had actually made sure that those guys who came from Matabeleland, that was the time of the disturbances in Matabeleland, and he made sure that those guys who came from Matabeleland and who were former ZAP were not in the interview. Right, 2 months down the line, they wanted another foreman because they wanted 3 foremen. This time, everyone who qualified, and I think we were 15 operators, were told to apply, and we applied. And I beat the hell out of everyone in that interview. I was on night shift. When other guys went with suits, I just wore a dust coat and went to the interview and did my thing. Right? Then knocked off, went home. When I came back to work, I didn't see my shift charge engineer, Norman Mills. I went about my duty. Then when I was checking the plant, because as an operator, sometimes you go out of the plant to go and check what is happening. I met him along the way because he was a hands-on man. He says to me, Mr. Foreman. I said, oh, did I make it? He said, no, it's no secret. You were number one. So I became a foreman. Later on, I became an operating superintendent at Wange Power Station. Like I said, life is what you make it. What I didn't tell you is that during the war, I used it to carry my books into the bush to go and read. I would make a fire. I remember going with my cousin, catching fish in the bush, made a fire, my books in a cat box. Before we slept, I would read. When I am at home, it was also reading. When I visited my parents who were now in Bulawayo, I would read until 1 o'clock during the night to make sure that I won't fail. That is from the beginning when I was reading, be it grade 7, be it JC, be it O level. It was only the A level that I wrote when I was already working in Wange Power Station. But ultimately, I became an operating superintendent. An operating superintendent is the one who runs the power station hands-on during the day, during the night, holidays, anytime. During weekdays, there will be managers from 8 o'clock to 16:30. After 16:30, the operating superintendent takes over. He is the one who runs the power station. On the holidays, he is on his own. Whatever happens, yes, he can phone the standby manager, who in this case might be someone who doesn't even know how the power station runs. That is talking engineering. He might be a financial guy, but because he's the duty manager, all you need to do is tell him. But all the work that is supposed to be done is by you. And you are the one who knows who to call. Be it a technician, an electrician, it's up to you, the superintendent, because you'll be having duty rosters for the people who you should call. Ultimately, I became that person. Superintendent reports to the operating manager, who reports to the general manager. So you see how high that position is that I reached. From running barefooted, going to school, right? I ended up owning several vehicles, of which I still have right now. I'm not bragging. I'm trying to inspire other Zimbabweans or Africans or other people somewhere else who will come across this video. Not to mention property. I got the property in Victoria Falls where I live now, in the upmarket area, which I bought. I invested when I was still working in Wange. I also have property in Wange. I bought a stand when I was still working and built a house. The same is what I did in Victoria Falls. Fine, the parents left a family house in Sizinda Township. But we have left that for our children if they want to go and live there. Myself and the brother. Otherwise, I did quite well. I thank God. God looked after me. I remember the first day I started learning grade 7, I made a short prayer. I said, God, please teach me so that I pass. And when I pass, I want to help others. I did that when I was a school teacher. I did that when I was a foreman and later on a superintendent in the Wange Power Station. I never stopped educating guys and assisting them to learn so that they get promotion. There are quite a number of operators who are overseas. Some are in the UK, some are in the USA, and some are in Australia who came through my shift, who came through my tender education system and assisting others on shift at Wange Power Station. If you are going to come across this video, please share it. Share it because I want it to be an inspirational to disadvantaged people, especially children. Don't think that just because your parents didn't send you to school, there's nothing you can do about it. I use it to catch fish in Dega River. Sometimes I use it to go into the water with a group of other young men with a net, sometimes stepping on crocodiles, just to catch fish for school fees as well as dressing myself, not to mention for relish as food. I did those things. I used it to carry an axe and a hammer and a chisel. Go and cut down trees, the mahogany. Open it, carve it with an axe, and use a plane and make coffee tables. I would carry those coffee tables to Bulawayo, which is the biggest town in Matabeleland, in a sack tied together as pieces. Then once I reached Bulawayo, I would assemble them, sell them after vanishing, get the money, and pay for my school fees. That is before I started teaching. And I succeeded. I caught fish, sold, used for school fees. This is where I am today. As we go on, I will show you what I'm doing now. I am now retired. And I discovered that retiring is also a new beginning. You don't retire to go and just sit and become a cabbage waiting to die. You retire and start other things. Have a good day. Thank you.